Getting back to Dad real quick, there's one thing that I wanted to talk to you about. It's a bit of a difficult subject to discuss, but typically when people come on this show and they have any kind of connection, such as you do with my dad, and that the day we lost Dad, we've never sat down and really went through that. We're not going to do that right now. That's for us to do another day. But a lot of the world and the industry, fans alike, were introduced to Mike Helton the day you had to get up on that podium and deliver that news that we had lost Dad. If you can, tell me, when you have that information, y'all are great friends. Did you realize, I guess, in that moment what you had to do, what you were about to do? And obviously, I imagine that might have been the hardest thing you've ever had to do. Can you kind of help me understand, I guess, what you went through to go through that process, and even maybe what the hours were like after that, what all that, I think you might have been living in Daytona at the time. Yeah. So it wasn't like you had to get up and go home like we did, or the rest of the industry. You drove down the road to the house at some point in the day, but you got to go up there and deliver that news. How did you do that? That was the toughest thing to do for anyone that whole day, was to go up there and tell everyone what had happened. I don't know how you did it, and how did you?
I'm not sure how I did it, but the sequence of events got us to the point where, okay, a lot of folks had already assumed what had happened, but we had to authenticate it by making an announcement. So we're back from the hospital into the garage area there, and Bill Jr., if you remember, had gone through cancer, and so he was on his toes, so to speak, but he didn't have the energy, that he didn't want to do it. And Brian and Paul Brooks and myself and Bill Jr. and others were sitting and saying, we've got to go make the announcement. And so Bill just kind of pointed to me and said, you go do it. And I said, well, what do I say? I said,
yeah.
Well, we just lost the greatest driver we've ever had. What am I supposed to say? And I think it was Brian or Paul Brooks both at the same time stepped in and said, just say that. Just say we lost him. And I still think that the realness of all that hadn't sunk in. I still thought that there was part of me that thought, well, I'm going to wake up here before I have to go do this, and I never got the chance to wake up. I just had to go do it, and walked in and said what I said, and I don't know that it was scripted or it just came out the way it came out, and then we went from there and did the best we could to figure out what next.
Yeah. Do you? You remember the rest of the day?
Yeah. So at the hospital, Teresa and Taylor were staying on the boat, the Intimidator down at the Chart House, and so when we knew the final results of things, then I told Richard and Judy, and I told Teresa, I said, if you don't want to stay on the boat, you can come stay with me and Linda, because your dad had stayed down there during the 24-hour race.
Yeah.
And he'd call her up, and so she knew that connection anyway. So we sent a car with her and Taylor down to the boat, and then they went to the house. And I left my car at the racetrack, and there was two other people with me. I think it might have been Michael and Richard. Maybe it wasn't Richard. I think Richard and Judy came in a little bit later on. So we all kind of just gathered at my house that afternoon. Taylor and Teresa stayed overnight. Somebody else did too, but I can't remember exactly. It wasn't Michael and Elizabeth or Richard and Judy, but we kind of operated out of there, and that's and it just all kind of flowed. There wasn't any plan or design or anything.
Yeah.
That evening just kind of unfolded because obviously there was a lot moving every step of the way, and staying close to Teresa and Taylor was important, and Richard and Judy. And I remember we got to the house and I got a phone call from the track security guy, and he said, "Do you know where Teresa Earnhardt is?" I said, "Yeah, she's here with me." "Why?" "The President of the United States wants to call her." And that was George Bush.
Yeah.
And so he ended up calling the house and talking to Teresa that night. And just the strange little things that you kind of remember. And I'll never get into all the other details
Sure.
that I remember, but we didn't sleep much, and you guys didn't sleep much at night, and it was
I don't remember nothing about.
Yeah.
After leaving the hospital, I remember going to the bus and talking to Tony Sr. and Tony Jr. and don't remember nothing after that. I don't remember how we got home or what I did that night or where I was at. Did you? I mean, for me, I had to. I had a lot of emotions about going back to the racetrack, and Rockingham was the next race. We had a great win with Steve Park, and it was a interesting, very emotional, positive day with the pre-race. Everybody was walking around with their 3 hats on. What was your emotions, I guess, going forward? Like, in the industry, I mean, you guys had to have a plan for the sport and had to make decisions for the sport and the betterment of the sport. But personally, did you have doubts about your future? Did you think, man, what are we going to do? Did you have doubts about the future of the sport? I mean, how did you guys, as an industry, pull the pieces together going forward?
Yeah, and I don't know that Bill was sick, and I worried a lot about him because of his relationship with your dad. But the mechanics of it all, between Daytona and Rockingham, the service and it from an industry perspective and personally too, I thought it was almost kind of a relief to go back to the racetrack.
Yeah,
it didn't feel right, and that may not have been exactly what you wanted to do, but there was some relief to getting back. It was like putting the pieces back together and keeping going, but at the same time being very understanding of what happened. And I don't think I ever worried about the future of the sport, and I never questioned my job in the sport at that point. I think we were more focused on finding an answer to how these things happen, because if you remember in 2000, it was Adam Petty and Kenny Earnhardt and Tony Roper in very similar situations. And so we had a series of things going on, which is what established the R&D Center over here at Concord Regional Airport is a focused effort on finding out why this is happening in our sport and stop it. And then we were working with Tony George and the Indianapolis group and building the safer barriers, and we were in the middle of developing all of those things. And so while we were finding the answers, because the world wanted to say, hey, what happened here?
Yeah.
We lost one of the greatest drivers in the history of motorsports. So what? What the heck happened? So we had an obligation to figure that out. We had to go through that, and that took us till August, I think it was, before we were able to get in front of everybody and say, here's what we found. And we used experts from all over the world to get those answers. And in the meantime, it was, how do we stop this from happening again? We can't go back, and we don't have a time machine. So the best tribute is to be sure it doesn't happen again. And so we turned the wick way up, and everybody in the world wanted to play a role in it. That was the most concerted effort around making race cars safer that ever happened, and still exists today because of that. And when I think about that day, I always land on the fact that hopefully we've done good from that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it saved countless lives with the innovation and the safety that we have in our cars today. You talk about Terry Labonte being a man of few words. I've probably had about 30 total with Terry Labonte, and I would say about 75% of those are about safety and what I had in my car and what he thought I should change, and all that. I think the whole sport was in a mode of trying to improve and trying to be better and sort of eliminate those issues. I know that you would not want that to be a defining moment in your life, but it was you going up there to that podium to deliver that news. I can't think of anyone else that I would have wanted to do that. And you've always protected that. Our family, you always protected me as a friend. You're a friend of many people in the garage, many drivers, and we appreciate you and appreciate everything you've done. I know you're going to be around for a long time and be a big part of the sport. You're around longer than I ever thought you'd be. That's for sure.